and socially dominant. Okay, so you see, oftentimes when you look in history and you see images and depictions of black people, that is a statue, oftentimes the nose is missing. Because the nose, that broad nose, tells a lot. So they like to knock that off. Okay, so this is the head of Judea, Prince of Lagash, around 2120 BC. All right, let's go to Genesis 12, because we want to find out what was promised to this one. And ultimately, he did what we all need to do. He came out of a situation. What was the situation? His forefathers and the people around him worshiped falsely. And God called him out of that false worship. That's what Joshua was talking about when he says, as for me and my household, we're going to serve the Lord. He says, put away those gods that you were serving before the flood. He's talking about before the Hebrews crossed over. That's what he's talking about. So Genesis 12:1. When you ready, go ahead.
Now the Lord has said unto Abram, get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee. Make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. So he calls him out of that land. Because if you know anything about Babylon, it is the hub, it is the birthplace of all false worship. And he calls him out of that place. He says, now the Lord has said unto him, Abram, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred, and I'm going to make a great nation out of thee. Verse 3. And I will bless him that blesseth, and curse him that curseth thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. And in thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Because someone coming out of you. But go ahead, verse 4. So Abram departed as the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. Go ahead. And Abram took Sarai, his wife, and Lot, his brother's son, and all their substance that they had gathered, and the souls that they had gotten in Haran, and they went forth to go into the land of Canaan. And came into the land of Canaan, they came. And that's the land that ultimately was promised to them, but it's an everlasting promise. So he knew then that he was just passing through, that ultimately he was going to inherit that at the time of the resurrection. But verse 6. And Abram passed through the land into the place of Chittim, to the plain of Moriah, and unto Canaanite was then, and the Canaanite was then in the land. And ultimately his seed was going to dwell in that land. Verse 7. And the Lord appeared unto Abram and said, unto thy seed will I give this land, and there built he an altar to the Lord who appeared unto him. So he believed God. He is called the father of faith. He went into a covenant with him, and then he worshiped. Let's go to Genesis 15, because something was foretold about this people. This is Genesis 15. Genesis 15 and verse 7. When you're ready, go ahead. And he said, I am the Lord that brought thee out of Ur of the Chaldees, to give this land to inherit. And he said, Lord God, whereby shall I know that I shall inherit? And he said unto him, take me a heifer of 3 years old, and a she-goat of 3 years old, and a ram of 3 years old, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he took unto him all these and divided them in the midst, and laid each piece one against another, but the birds divided he not. Go ahead. And when the fowls came down upon the carcasses, Abram drove them away. So he's going to have a vision. What happens? And when the sun was going down, deep sleep fell upon Abram, and lo, a horror of great darkness fell upon him. And he said unto him, Abram, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in the land that is not there, and shall serve them. They shall afflict them 400 years. So he tells him about what's going to happen to that seed that was promised. He said that they're going to dwell in the land that's not theirs for 400 years. This is not talking about America. This is talking about Egypt. But let's keep reading. And also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterwards shall they come out with great substance. So he says, after that time, that seed is going to come out with great substance. Because we know when Israel came out, what did they do? They spoiled the Egyptians. Verse 15. And thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace. Thou shalt be buried in a good old age. So this is for the time to come, but it's not yet. Why? But in the 4th generation they shall come hither again. For the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. That's something about God, that nations have cups of iniquity. Once that cup of iniquity reaches its brim, then he will take that nation down. But he will give them some space, just like you saw with Nineveh and Jonah. Then you read in Nahum
about them being destroyed. You see, that's what he did with practically all the sons of Noah. Shem had a time to rule, and he failed. Ham had a time to rule, and he failed. The Gentiles, or the sons of Japheth, are ruling right now, and their time is coming to an end. So it says, but in the fourth generation they shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. Let's go into Exodus 1. Because we want to see when his seed goes into, we just getting background, we want to see what happens to Israel when they go into this land. Because it was already foretold. This is Exodus 1 and verse 7. Because the children of Israel went in the days of Joseph, and they dwelt there. And we know the story that he was put on a pedestal in Egypt and reigned only second to Pharaoh. But after he died and that generation died, another Pharaoh came. This is 7. When you're ready, go ahead.
And the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly, and multiplied and waxed exceedingly mighty.
Go ahead.
And the land was filled with them. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we.
Go ahead.
Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply and it come to pass that when there falleth out a war, they join also into our enemies and fight against us, and so get them out of the land.
So the fear of this Pharaoh was that this people, they're growing. They were not yet a nation. Israel was not a nation, because you're not totally a nation if you don't have land. That's why the Palestinians over there will throw rocks at a tank, because they understand the importance of the land. See, we have been brainwashed in this American diaspora. We think that freedom is integration. That's not freedom. Freedom is sovereignty and land. Always has been, always will be. And if you don't have sovereignty, if you don't have land, you don't have anything. You don't have anything. So he feared that these people would join to their enemies. And he ultimately saw these people as a threat. Let's keep reading.
Therefore, they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens. And they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Python and Ramesses.
Okay, so it said, therefore, they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens. And they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Python and Ramesses. Okay, but when you look at history, it gets a little tricky, because that place was not called Ramesses at the time that Israel was there. And then furthermore, the Egyptian timeline is off by hundreds of years. It's off by hundreds of years. And that's why when I said in the introduction, many people look at this as a fable, because they can't find Israel in that time frame that they have set, because they didn't account for, in a lot of instances, co-regencies. 2 pharaohs reigning at the same time. So they're about 200 years off. So it's probably, Avarice is probably the place, which is a place that's right up under Ramesses. Okay? But let's keep reading.
Verse 12. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew.
Just like some roaches, right? So the more you afflict us, the more we multiply and grow. We don't die, we multiply. Verse 13.
And they were grieved because of the children of Israel.
And
the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor.
Go ahead.
And they made their lives bitter with hard bondage, and mortar and brick, and in all manner of service in the field. All their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor. And
that was our first bondage. That was our first bondage, and that's the vision that Abraham had, that his seed, he said, Lord, but surely that your seed is going to serve in a land that's not theirs. That's what he saw. That was the darkness that he saw. Slavery, captivity, bondage, exploitation, and oppression. Verse 15.
And the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of one was Shiphrah, and the name of the other Puah.
So here you have some faithful women. It says, and the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of the one was Shiphrah, and the name of the other Puah. Go ahead.
And he said, when you do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew woman,
when you deliver those babies, go ahead,
and see them upon the stool, if it be a son, then ye shall kill him. If it be a daughter, then she shall live.
Why kill the boy and save the woman? Because ultimately Ultimately, it is through male muscle mass that revolution takes place. Ultimately, it is through men that you fight wars. Ultimately, it is the man who carries the seed. He is the farmer, the woman is the earth. He plants the seed. You are what your father is. That's why in every form of genocide, you in the ancient world, and even until this day, you look at Sudan, what did they do? They killed all the men and raped the women. That's what they did. You look at in Europe and Bosnia and different places where you see programs of genocide, that's what they did. So he said, keep the woman or the daughter and slay the son, because if they take that woman and an Egyptian lies with that woman, that child is an Egyptian. Yes, he takes on the characteristics of both, but ultimately you are what your father is. But what do these faithful midwives do?
But the midwives feared God.
Hey, think about Pharaoh. Go ahead.
And did not as the king of Egypt commanded, but saved the men, children alive.
But save the men, children alive. It's always some program to destroy the black man. Always. You see that even until this day. That's what mass incarceration is. You in jail in your prime years in which you should be having a baby. It's always a plan to destroy black men. But go ahead.
And the king of Egypt called for the midwife and said unto them, why have ye done this? And have saved the men, children alive.
Go ahead.
And the midwife said unto Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, but they are lively and are delivered ere the midwives come in unto them.
So they say, hey, you know, before we get there, they already had the baby. What it was they're not going to kill those children. Just like Joseph said, man, listen, should I sin against God? When Potiphar's wife came to him trying to get him to commit adultery, he's like, listen, you know, he's just not going to do it. But verse 20.
Therefore God dwelt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed very mighty. Okay, so here you see that Israel is in Egypt at this time. But where's the evidence? Because they say there is none. Ultimately, what it is, though, is people's careers have been based on faulty timelines. The actual timelines of other nations and periods of history have been based on the faulty Egyptian timeline. And so things like this are ignored largely. This is from the Brooklyn papyrus called the Shipra papyrus. And if you look at it, it says, thus we see at position 11 the name Menahem, later recorded for the 16th king of Israel. You see all these Hebrew names from a papyrus that came out of Egypt before Israel was a nation. At position 13, 14, 16, 22, and 67, we had variants of the tribe of Ephraim, Issachar, the name of the fifth son of Leah by Jacob. At position 23, the name of the clan Asher occurs. These are not Egyptian names. It occurs named after its eponymous, ancestor, the second son of Zilpah by Jacob. And finally, at position 21, we read Shipra. But we just read Shipra in here. Is it the same one? I'm not saying that. But the name is a Hebrew name, and these were names common amongst, this was a list of servants to the Egyptians. The name carried by one of the two Hebrew midwives instructed to kill the Israelite newborn males in Exodus. We just read that. So the evidence is that they were there. If this is, I read they say, if this is, let's keep it. This is from David Roll's A Test of Time, Volume 1, pages 276 and 277. The Egyptian term Eberu, which, as we have noted in the Amarna period, has clear historical affinities with the biblical term Hebrew. Also appears in the Brooklyn Papyrus, or the Shipra Papyrus. Thus we read Eberu Rishpu at position 9. If the versal of the Brooklyn Papyrus is representative of a typical Egyptian estate, the mid-13th dynasty, then at least half the total servant population in Egypt at this time was of Syro-Palestinian origin.
So in other words, you have a bunch of Hebrews there, but they act like Israel was never there. I've heard even one of the biggest so-called rabbis, because we're going to talk about these people too, in America say that Israel was never in Egypt. No, you weren't in Egypt, but Israel was in Egypt. Israel was in Egypt. You might not have been. They say there was no Exodus. No, you'll find that there was an Exodus indeed. So this people is exploited by the Egyptians. Let's go back to the scriptures. Exodus 2. Because it said after 400 years, he would bring them into a land. So here we see him raise up, prepare a deliverer for them. This is Exodus 2 and verse 1. Exodus 2 and 1. When you ready, go ahead.
And then when a man of the house of Levi took to a wife a daughter of Levi, and the woman conceived and bare a son, and when she saw him that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. And when she could no longer hide him, she took for him an ark of bulrushes and dabbed it with slime and with pitch, and put the child therein. Go ahead. And she laid it in the flags by the river's brink. And his sisters stood afar off to witness what would be done to him. Because they could no longer have this son that they were not supposed to have. So it said it was a beautiful, a goodly child. She hid him 3 months when she could have no longer. It says she laid it in the flags by the river's brink. Verse 5. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river. And her maids walked along by the river's side. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him and said, this is one of the Hebrews' children. Go ahead. Verse 11. Let's get down to verse 11. Because then Miriam goes and asks, hey, you want me to get one of the Hebrew women to nurse it for you? And so he's nursed, so Moses is nursed by his own mother and paid for it. But go ahead. And it came to pass in those days, when Moses was grown, that he went out unto his brethren, looked on their birds, and he spied an Egyptian, spied an Hebrew, one of his brothers. So even though he was raised in the house in Egypt, right? He was there. And Egypt was a covert for him during the time of genocide. Just like Jesus was in Egypt during the time of genocide. He knew who he was. So when he saw his Hebrew brethren being smitten, verse 12 says he looked this way and that way. And when he saw that there was no man, what did he do? He slew the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. That sounds like something we'll do. He slew the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Verse 13. Or verse 15, excuse me. When you're ready, go ahead. Now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh. Go ahead. And dwelt in the land of Midian. He sat down by a well. So Moses flees from Pharaoh and he goes into Midian. He goes into Saudi Arabia. That's what he went to. So when you look at maps, even in your Bible, you probably have the Sinai Peninsula and that place where Israel, that's not accurate. Nothing is accurate about that. He actually went into Saudi Arabia. But let's keep going. Verse 16. Thank you. Now the priests of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. And the shepherds came and drove them away. Go ahead. But Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. And when they came to Ruel, the father, he said, how is it that ye have come so soon today? So here, this is Jethro here called Ruel, and it says, how is it that ye have come so soon today? And listen to what these young women said. Go ahead. And he said, an Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherd. We know that Moses was an Israelite of the tribe of Levi, but they called him an Egyptian. Why? Because perhaps he had an Egyptian God, but certainly he had to look just like the Egyptians. Just how Joseph was mistaken as an Israelite as an Egyptian by his own brethren after many years of being in Egypt. Why? Because they looked the same. So he spoke to them roughly, Joseph did. He more than likely had a different God. And to think that you send him in a slave and then he rises to be second only to, right under Pharaoh, you can't even fathom that that's your brother. So here we have Israelites mistaken as
Egyptians, we must answer the question. In an era of racism and white supremacy, what do the Egyptians look like? What did the Egyptians look like? So let's go to this. That's just a picture of the Brooklyn papyrus and what it looks like. The color of the Egyptians. Here you see the Sphinx. Again, the nose is gone. Some say Napoleon did it. Some say, I read where it says Arab fanatics did it. Who did it? I don't know. I'm not claiming to know. But what sticks out to me is what it looked like before you see, before the nose, you see a broad nose from cheek to cheek, and you see broad lips. That's what you see. Khufu, who is acknowledged by many to come from the 4th dynasty. See, these are not white people. A painted relief of a light infantry in Thebes, about 1480 BC. So if Moses is mistaken as an Egyptian, we see what the Egyptians look like. See, you go to Egypt today and you see white Arabs. Those are not the ancients. Those are not the original Egyptians. That's why they go through there and they destroy artifacts. They use acid and different chemicals to change the complexion of the walls, the people on the walls. That's at the relief in the temple of Ramesses. Queen Time. These are black people. These are not Charlton Heston and Elizabeth Taylor and all these people. No, that's a falsehood. And Hotep the second. If there was any mistake, a blue-black, Meritaten, daughter of Pharaoh Akhenaten. Sister got braids. Sister looked like sister running around here. See his hair, locks. Pharaoh Doja, 2670 BC. Some more locks. Amenemhet. Third. See this? These are not white people. Pharaoh Hundi. That's a car of Tutankhamun. Here's a mannequin of Tutankhamun. Here is the lie that they show you on National Geographic. Now we got all this, but they use some scans to make that. The stuff is out of the vain imagination of people's minds, and you have to take the time to deal with it because racism and white supremacy is so strong that they will make this Tutankhamun, where we see this and all of this. But how do we get this? Through lies. Even their own ancient scholars tell them the color of the Egyptians. This is Herodotus, the Greek so-called father of history. I'm not going to read all of this, but he said something about the Egyptians, the Ethiopians, and the Libyans. He said they are black color by reason of the burning heat. He wasn't, and when he said this, you read his histories, and he said it more than once, he wasn't even talking about color per se. He was talking about the Nile. But indirectly, he tells us the color of the Egyptians. This is one of the greatest African scholars to ever live, Sheikh Anta Diop, who had, I believe, he had PhDs or doctorates in physics, African history, Egyptology, linguistics, and anthropology. And he said something that you don't need a degree to come to determine. He said Herodotus, the one we just read about, may be mistaken when he reports the customs of a people, when he reasons more or less cleverly to explain a phenomenon incomprehensible in his day. But one must grant that he was at least capable of recognizing the skin color of the inhabitants of countries he has visited. Why did he have to say that in his pivotal work, The African Origin of Civilization, Myth or Reality? Because many people were saying that Herodotus was mistaken when he said that the Egyptians were black. He said, are you serious? A little child in here can tell you a color. This is Maspero, an Egyptologist. he said something, because Herodotus is not the only one. He said, by the almost unanimous testimony of ancient historians, Greek and Roman, by the way, he said they, Egyptians, belong to an African race which first settled in Ethiopia. Ethiopia was first. On the Middle Nile, following the course of the river, they gradually reached the sea. That's his ancient peoples of the Orient. So let's get back to this. We want to go to Exodus 4. We want to see, we've been told a pack of lies. We've been told a pack of lies. And have internalized every negative, bad thing that people have said about us, about being black. When you read the Bible, the vast majority of it, you're talking about black people. This is an Eastern book. See, you have a Christian, so-called Christian, a twist on the scriptures. And so they have Europeanized everything and whitewashed everything. That's why you have these images of Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci they made of a white Christ, when the description of him was a black man with woolly hair. Let's read this in Exodus 4. This is Exodus 4 at verse 1. So Moses is mistaken as an Egyptian. He's an Israelite. Just like Joseph and even Paul the apostle. But let's go to verse 1. Are you ready? Go ahead.
And Moses answered and said, but behold, they will not believe me, nor hearken unto my voice.
Go ahead.
They will say, the Lord had not appeared unto me.
So the Lord did appear unto him. He manifested himself unto him, and he said he's going to use him to free his people. But go ahead.
And the Lord said unto him, what is that in thine hand? And he said, a rod. And he said, cast it on the ground.
Go ahead.
And he cast it on the ground, and it became a serpent. And Moses fled from before.
Yeah, that looks like something he'll do too. Verse 4.
And the Lord said unto Moses, put forth thine hand and take it by the tail. And he put forth his hand and caught it, and it became a rod in his hand.
So that was a sign. Go ahead, verse 5.
That they may believe that the Lord God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, had appeared unto them.
Right. So he equipped him, verse 6, because he did something else. So he said, I'm going to make your staff turn into a serpent as a sign of something else. Go ahead.
And the Lord said furthermore unto him, put now thy hand into thy bosom. And he put his hand into his bosom. When he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous as snow. Why
wasn't that in the Ten Commandments moving that they show every year? Because it is no miracle for Charlton Heston to put his hand in his cloak and pull it out, and it's white. His hand's already white. But if he was blue-black and he put his hand in there and it came out white, that's a miracle. See, we've been sold, and we Negroes, we can't wait to see Ten Commandments. We watch it like we never saw it. So it says, and the Lord said, furthermore, put now thine hand into thy bosom, and he put his hand in his bosom, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous as snow. Verse 7.
And he said, put thine hand into thy bosom again. And he put his hand into his bosom again and plucked it out of his bosom. And behold, it was turned again as his other flesh. And it shall come to pass that they will not believe thee, neither hearken to the voice of the first sign, that they will believe the voice of the last sign.
Okay, so, and he used him, and we know what? That the Lord used him, and the Lord brought all these plagues on Egypt. But again, they would say there is no record of that. Number one, they're looking at the wrong time. They're hundreds of years off. So if you're looking for something at the wrong time, when you find it, you're not going to put it in the right spot. It's just like if you're doing the right thing at the wrong time, you're not going to get the right result. So this is something here. This is a papyrus. This is evidence of the Exodus. Let's just go here. This is the Emperor papyrus. Now some say this is not talking about the Exodus and the plagues that were laid on the people. Others say it was. I'm saying it cannot be ignored. Because when we read, this is small, I'm going to read this to you. These are some of the things that this person, this Egyptian who wrote this, was saying was going on in Egypt. Again, some say it's not valid, some say it is. I'm saying it can't be ignored. That's what I'm saying. So the plague of blood in Emperor's 2, it says the pestilence is throughout the land, blood is everywhere. It says the river or the Nile is blood, men shrink and thirst after water. Concerning the Egyptian livestock, all animals, their hearts weep, cattle moan. Concerning the plague of hail and fire, the fire ran along the ground, there was hail and fire mingled with the hail. Force up, help us. Gates, columns, and walls are consumed by fire. Concerning the plague of locusts, no fruit, no herbs are found, or that the earth will cease from the noise and tumult, or will be one more. Trees are destroyed, and the branches are stripped off. The plague of darkness, the land is without light. The plague of Egypt's firstborn. He who places his brother in the crown is everywhere. Groaning is throughout the land, mingled with lamentations. Forsooth the children of princes are dashed against the walls. Forsooth the children of the princes are cast out into the streets. Freeing of the slaves and their pillage of Egypt. Like I said, they were going to spoil the Egyptians. They said, man, give me your Jew. They gave it to him. Just leave. The plunderer is everywhere, and the servant takes what he finds. Indeed, poor men have become wealthy. Gold, silver, and jewels are fastened to the necks of female slaves. Slaves who have now been freed up throughout the land, the king's storehouse has now become common property. That can't be ignored. But you don't hear anything about that. You don't hear anything about that. Let's go back to the scriptures. Let's go to the 105th division of Psalms. 105th division of Psalms. So Brooklyn Papyrus, we read, they don't talk about that. They say, well, it's the wrong time. Emperor, they said, well, we're not going to talk about that. Man, people's careers, everybody has something on the line, right? So these in their ivory tower, these so-called intellectuals who don't believe in the Bible, but use the Bible to do to chart their research initially. That's what Egyptologists did. Even using Hebrew or their version of Hebrew to break down certain things in Egyptian. The Egyptians had written. So they set something forth. They got to keep going with it. Their livelihood is on the line. Then you have the Arabs who conquered northern Africa, including Egypt. They don't want to acknowledge that Israel was there, because if they say they were there, then they may have some stock there. They give them credence to what they're doing in the land today. And they certainly don't want to say that they're black. So you have these scholars lying, you have these Arabs lying, and you have these so-called Jews lying. This is 105th division of Psalms, because here the conquest, like we read that this people was going to be in the land of Canaan. Let's read this. This is Psalms 105 verse 1. Are you ready? Go ahead.
Oh, give thanks unto the Lord. Call upon his name. Make known his deeds among the people.
He is worthy of thanks. So what has he done for his people? Verse 23.
Israel also came into Egypt, and Jacob sojourned in the land of Ham.
That land of Ham is talking about Egypt, because Ham was the progenitor of the darker races, not the Negro, though. But go ahead.
And he increased his people greatly, and they were stronger than their enemies.
Go ahead.
He turned their heart to hate his people, to deal subtlety with his servant. He sent Moses, his servant, and Aaron, whom he had chosen.
See, we read this in Exodus, but go ahead.
They showed his signs among them and wonders in the land of Ham.
We read something about the signs, and then he dropped plagues on them. Go ahead.
He sent darkness and made it dark, and they rebelled not against his word.
Go ahead.
He turned their waters into blood and slew their fish. Their lands brought forth frogs in abundance in the chambers of their king.
Go ahead.
He spake, and there came divers sorts of flies and lice in all their coasts. He gave them hell for rain and flaming fire in their land.
Go ahead.
He smote their vines also and their fig trees, and brake the trees of their coasts.
All the stuff we reading about in there. But go ahead.
He spake, and the locusts came, and caterpillars, and that without number. And then eat up all the herbs in their land, and devoured the fruit of their ground.
What else he do?
He smote also all the firstborn in their land, the chief of all their strength.
Then he made the poor rich. Go ahead.
He brought them forth also with silver and gold, and there was not one feeble person among the tribes.
Bring you out with great substance. Go ahead.
Egypt was glad when they departed.
Please leave. Go ahead.
For the fear of them fell upon them.
They told Pharaoh, can't you see that Egypt is destroyed? Verse 44. What else he do?
And gave them the lands of the heathen. They inherited the labor of the people.
Right. So when they came out of Egypt in the fear, when you read in the first 5 books, after they came out, you read about those conquests. People were fearful of them. So, but again, they say there's no evidence. But there's evidence. There's evidence we're not even going to really deal with, but we'll deal with this. This is the Armament letters in 1887. So this is evidence of Israel's conquest of these heathens. Like he said in verse 44, and gave them the lands of the heathen, and they inherited the labor of the people. It's not like they were moving into some place where nobody was at. Houses constructed. Get out. They put them out to what? They took their stuff that they had already worked to establish. It says in 1887, a Bedouin woman searching among ancient ruins near the Nile River discovered some inscribed clay tablets. This site, located 200 miles south of Cairo, was later named El Amana, and the tablets became known as the Amana tablets or Amana letters. Bedouin excavated more than 300 of this uniform tablets from the site, but could not interest scholars in purchasing them. They were trying to make some money. The Amana tablets were dispersed. Some were lost, others broken, but fortunately most ended up in the museum and collections. And it says that Hebrew, this is what this one says, that Hebrew or the Hebrews are now attempting to take Jerusalem. This is a Canaanite writing to the Egyptians for help, saying, please help us. These Hebrews over here about to wreak havoc. This is documented archaeological evidence. See, we just retracing our steps. Let's go to where we at now?
First Kings.
First Kings 6:1. So we want to find out when the Exodus actually took place. This is First Kings 6:1. And we don't understand, we walk by faith. We understand and believe that the Bible is true. But understand, even history corroborates what you read in the scriptures. First Kings, and when you see a discrepancy, it's with man. Just like this. This is the reason why they can't find evidence of Israel being in Egypt in the Exodus, because you're looking in the wrong time period. This is 1 Kings 6 and
after the children of Israel were come out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign of Israel, in the month Ziph, which is the 2nd month, they began to build the house of the Lord. Okay, so it says he came out,
it says, and it came to pass in the 480th year after the children of Israel were come out of the land of Egypt. In the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month Ziph, which is the 2nd month, that he began to build a house of the Lord. So you're talking approximately 1440 something. But what's the date that they commonly use to set the Exodus that they don't believe in? Is 1290 BC instead of about 1441 BC, around that time. So when they say Ramses II, you'll watch little silly movies like The Prince of Egypt. He wasn't a pharaoh at that time in the Exodus. So if you want to know when it happened, when the Exodus happened, it happened 480 years after Solomon started to build the temple. All right, let's go to Exodus 32, because he gave his people. Let's go back. We'll read something here. He gave his people freedom. He's trying to make them into a nation by giving them land, sovereignty, and a constitution, which is the law of God. Giving them great substance. But what was the mindset of our people? This is Exodus 32 and verse 1. When you ready, go ahead.
And when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down out of the mountain, the people gathered themselves together unto Aaron and said unto him, Up, make us gods, which shall be before us.
Yep, that's something we'll do. Make us some gods. Moses is gone but a little while. Make us some gods. Negro, you just got delivered by God. God just split the Red Sea, brought the mightiest nation on the planet to its knees, and now you want to make a God. Go ahead.
For as for this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we want not what has become of him.
See, we ultimately as a people didn't have a heart or a mind to serve God. Let's skip down to verse 4. When you're ready, go ahead.
And he received them at their hand and fashioned it with a graven tool, after he had made it a molten calf, and he said, These be the gods of Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt.
So they're in that spot, right, where ultimately, where Moses went to initially when he was on the run. And this is the audacity of these Negroes. You would take what God gave you, they break out the golden earrings, which are ears of your wives and your sons and your daughters, and bring them unto me. And they fashioned a golden calf, made a calf, and said, These be the gods. Those gods weren't even there to bring you out of Egypt, rather. You just made them just now. But see, that's the mind of man. Foolishness. We'll worship a stock of a tree, or a statue, or the sun, the moon, and the stars. Go ahead.
And the Lord said unto Moses, Go get thee down, for thy people which thou broughtest up out of the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves.
Right, don't want to claim them at that point. That's like your cousin who's a criminal. You don't want to claim them at that point. He said, the Lord said unto Moses, Go get thee down, for thy people which thou broughtest out of the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. Verse 8.
They have turned aside quickly out of the way which I commanded them. They have made them a molten calf, and have worshipped, and have sacrificed thereunto, and said, These be thy gods, O Israel, which have brought thee up out of the land of Egypt.
What did he say about this people?
And the Lord said unto Moses, I have seen this people, and behold, it is a stiff-necked people.
Hard-headed. Go ahead.
Now therefore let me alone, that my wrath may wax hot against them, and that I may consume them, and I will make of thee a great nation.
So he was going to kill the whole nation and keep Moses alive. Why? Because that would still be fulfilling the covenant that he made with Abraham, passed down to Isaac and Jacob. But Moses and the seeds, verse 11.
And Moses besought the Lord his God and said, Lord, for thy wrath wax hot against thy people, which thou hast brought forth out of the land of Egypt with great power and with a mighty hand.
Go ahead.
Wherefore should the Egyptians speak and say, For mischief did he bring them out, to slay them in the mountains, and to consume them upon the face of the earth. Turn from thy fierce wrath and repent of this evil against thy people.
Go ahead.
Remember Abraham, Isaac, Israel, thy servants, to whom thou swearest by thy own self, and said unto them, I will multiply your seed as the stars of heaven, and of all this land that I have spoken of will I give unto your seed, and they shall inherit it forever. And the Lord repented of the evil which he thought to do unto his people. So
he interceded on their behalf, and that was our mindset. Let's go to Leviticus 26 and find out what happened as a result of such a mindset. We were given everything by God. Not the jewels or the gold or the silver. That's not what was important. Ultimately, the word of God, his law, that was important. The law, statutes, commandments, the ordinances, the judgments. That was our wisdom in the sight of the nations. But we didn't have a mind to obey. And God manifested himself unto us, showing to himself that, showing to us that he is indeed God. How could you not serve him? That's what the creation does every day. It screams to you that God exists, but we want to go our own way, marching on a path to destruction. Leviticus 26 and verse 14. When you ready, go ahead.
But if you will not hearken unto me, when I do all these commandments, and ye shall despise my statutes,
go ahead.
Of your soul abhor my judgments, so that ye will not do all my commandments, but that ye break my covenant.
So he says, if you won't keep my commandments and you or you hate my judgment, something's gonna happen. And you break my covenant, something's gonna happen to you. See, he don't love you in spite of yourself. Yes, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, but ultimately you have to obey him. Verse 27.
And if you would not for all this hearken unto me, but walk contrary to me,
what's gonna happen?
then I will walk contrary unto you also in fury. And I will chastise you 7 times for your sin.
Right. Only you have I known of all the nations of the earth. Therefore, I will punish you for all your iniquities. That's what Amos tells us. But go ahead.
And ye shall eat the flesh of your son, and the flesh of your daughter shall ye eat.
And these seeds, you said, I'm going to bring through other people upon you. You're going to be starving so much you're going to consume your own children. Go ahead.
And I will destroy your high places, and cut down your images, and cast your carcasses into the carcasses of your idols, and my soul shall abhor you.
That's the fruit for that false worship. I'm going to cut down your images, these idols, and he says, and you cast your carcasses upon the carcasses of your idols, and my soul shall hate you. Verse 31.
And I will make your cities waste, and bring your sanctuaries unto desolation. And I will not smell the savor of your sweet oil.
You turn your back on God like we did as a people, he'll turn his back on you. And that's why we're in the condition that we are right now. And it just started now. It started when you made that golden calf. Go ahead.
And I will bring the land into desolation, and your enemies which dwell therein shall be astonished at you. And I will scatter you among the heathen.
So you're going to be dispersed everywhere. Go ahead.
And will draw out a sword after you. And your land shall be desolate, and your cities waste.
Go ahead.
Then shall the land enjoy her Sabbaths as long as it lie desolate. And ye shall be in your enemy's land. Even then shall the land rest and enjoy her Sabbath.
So he says you're going into captivity, and at least the land can enjoy her Sabbath at that time. Verse 35.
As long as it lies desolate, it shall rest. Because it did not rest in your Sabbath when ye dwelt upon it. And upon them that I left alive of you, I will send a faintness into the hearts in the land of their enemies. And the sound of a shaking leaf shall chase them. And they shall flee as fleeing from a sword. And they shall fall when none pursueth.
Go ahead.
And they shall fall one upon another, as it were before a sword when none pursueth. And you shall have no power to stand before your enemies.
And that's what has happened to us as a people. And then he says, amongst these nations, he says, and ye shall perish among the heathen, and the land of your enemies shall eat you up. And that's what's happened to us. That's what's happened to us. In verse 39, it says, and they that are left of you shall pine away in their iniquity or in their sin, and your enemies' land, and also in the iniquities of their fathers shall they pine away with them. And that's where we are. And it's, again, that dispersion, captivity, we were in a constant cycle of captivity. When you read Judges and when you continue to read the scriptures, constant cycle of captivity. Sinning against God, captivity, crying out to God, he delivered us, sin and some more. Let's go to 2 Kings. Because ultimately, we read about the Amorites and their cup of iniquity in the 4th generation. The Lord will deal with you according to your folly. His word is true. What was prophesied unto Moses, or what he prophesied rather, prior to Israel even going into the land. Let's see what happens here. This is 2 Kings 17. Because at this time, we have the kingdom of Israel. They're an established nation now. They have a kingdom, and they had a king. Saul, David, Solomon. Solomon went astray as far as false worship. Then the kingdom was split in two. You had the northern kingdom, which retained the name of Israel, that consisted of 10 tribes. And you had the southern kingdom, which consisted of Judah and Benjamin. This is referring to the northern kingdom. When you're ready, go ahead.
In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried Israel away into Syria, and placed them in Halad and the harbor by the river of Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes. So
this is 721, 722 BC. This is when the northern kingdom goes, or the 10 tribes go into captivity. Verse 7.
For so it was that the children of Israel had sinned against the Lord their God.
That's why they went. He said, if you don't keep my commandments, I'm going to disperse you. You're going to go into the land of the heathen. Go ahead.
Which had brought them up out of the land of Egypt from under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and had feared other gods.
We read that, what they did, what our forefathers did. Verse 8.
And walked in the statutes of the heathen, whom the Lord cast out from before the children of Israel, and the kings of Israel which they had met.
So dumb, those false gods couldn't save them from you. Why would you go serving those false gods? They obviously have no power. But verse 19.
Also Judah kept not the commandments of the Lord their God, but walked in the statutes of Israel which they had made.
So now Israel goes in captivity, and then Judah basically does the same thing as far as false worship. But go ahead.
And the Lord rejected all the seed of Israel and afflicted them, and delivered them into the hand of spoilers until they had cast them out of his sight.
So we want to read this real quick. Look at this. This is Sargon II's inscription. And listen to what he says here. This is talking about, it says, this clay crystal contains Assyrian inscriptions in cuneiform writing that validates the biblical account. See, you can track what's happened to us as a people in history. It validates the biblical account regarding the capture and deportation of the northern kingdom of Israel in 722 BC. The inscriptions records the ancient campaign of Sargon II in Syria and revolts in Samaria, the capital of northern Israel. Before and after Sargon's campaigns, the Assyrian inscriptions also record King Sargon's boasting. I besieged and captured Samaria and carried off 27,290 of its inhabitants as booty. 2 Kings 17 verses 5 through 6. Let's go back to the scriptures and read something else, because we read that Judah also went astray. This is 2 Chronicles 36. 2 Chronicles 36. Also sinned against God and therefore was taken into captivity. But one thing about Judah, they were brought back for a time. We're going to read. This is 2 Chronicles 36 and verse 14. 2 Chronicles 36 and verse 14. You ready? You can go ahead.
Moreover, all the chief of the priests and the people transgressed very much after all the abominations of the heathen.
So they worship him falsely. Apostasy. Go ahead.
And polluted the house of the Lord which he had hallowed in Jerusalem. And the Lord God of their fathers sent to them by his messengers, rising up betimes and sinning, because he had compassion on his people and on his dwelling place. See, that's the mercy of God, that he will raise up these prophets. He will raise up messengers to come to you betimes or early to tell you about your trifling ways. But we don't want to hear that. You see, that's partially why you go after other gods. So you can be a fornicator and an adulterer and an idolater with some other gods. You can be a liar and a backbiter with some other gods. Like today, that other Jesus who says you can't judge nothing. Who says he loves you in spite of yourself. You see, that's why they're going after those false gods, because we didn't have a mind to serve the true and living God, because we don't want to live according to a standard. We want to do whatever our carnal lusts tell us to do and are driven by that. But go ahead. But they mocked the messengers of God and despised his words.
Go ahead.
And misused his prophets until the wrath of the Lord rose against his people, till there was no remedy.
What do you want him to do? If he is a just God, he has to punish you for sin. If he does not, that is not justice. So you mean to tell me he's taking out these other nations for sin, but when the one nation that he manifested himself to directly goes against him, he doesn't do anything? That's not justice. You ready? Go ahead.
Therefore he brought upon them the king of the Chaldees, who slew their young men with the sword in the house of their sanctuary, and had no compassion upon young men or maiden, old man, or him that stood for age. He gave them all into his hand. So
when he's talking about the Chaldees at this time and how Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians came upon him, these are Gentiles in that place now. Verse 18.
In all the vessels of the house of God, great and small, and the treasures of the house of the Lord, and the treasures of the king and of his princesses, all these he brought to Babylon.
He brought to Babylon. He poked out the eyes of the last king, killed his sons before his eyes, and then poked his eyes out. So that's the last thing he saw, the slaying of his sons. Brought Judah into captivity. Did you finish verse
19?
Thank you.
And they burnt the house of God and break down the wall of Jerusalem and burn all the palaces thereof with fire and destroyed all the goodly vessels thereof.
They raised it R-A-Z-E-D to the ground. Okay, this is about 586. But let's see something that happened. Let's go to verse 22. Verse 22. Because Judah went into captivity, but it was prophesied that they would come out and they would be able to go back and rebuild. That's why when Jesus came on the scene, there was a temple there. There was some semblance of a nation, even though they were under foreign rule. And this is prophesied in Isaiah. The one that does this, his name is mentioned before he's born, showing you that the word of God is true. 2 Chronicles 36 and 22. You ready to go here?
Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord spoken by the mouth of Jeremiah might be accomplished. The Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and put it also in writing, saying,
what?
Thus said Cyrus, king of Persia, all the kingdoms of the earth hath the Lord God of heaven given me. And he had charged me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah.
So God put it on his heart and he set it in motion. He set that in motion because you had other decrees or other edicts that were put forth by other sovereigns like Artaxerxes. In the days of Ezra and Nehemiah, that's how they were able to go back and rebuild. And it was under tumultuous circumstances, but nevertheless, sometimes that's just how it is, and you have to have faith. That's why they were building, and then some had their weapons out. So it says, who is there among you of his people? The Lord his God be with him, and let him go up. And here is the proof of that happened. This is Cyrus' cylinder. It was discovered by Hormuz Rassam during excavations he performed in Babylon in 1879. It reads, all of their peoples I gathered together and restored to their dwelling places. This is Cyrus. This is Cyrus, and that's the evidence of it. Again, we're just retracing our steps. Because ultimately they were able to rebuild. So when the Messiah came, there was a temple to go into. Even it had been made larger by the Edomite king Herod, because the Edomites were converted. History tells us by the Judeans. Even Edom was there, and they even took part of Israel that when Judah went back, they were never able to get that part back. But this is Luke 19 and verse 41. Luke 19 and verse 41. Because here, the Messiah is going to tell us about events that are going to lead to our ultimate captivity. This is Luke 19 and verse 41. Luke 19 and verse 41. When you ready, go ahead.
And he was come near, he beheld the city and wept over.
So here's the Messiah. He's weeping over the city of peace, over Jerusalem. What did he say?
Saying that thou hast known, even thou, at least in this thy day, things which belong unto thy peace. But now they are hid from thine eyes.
If you had only known who I was and what I mean to you, he said, now they are hid from thy eyes. But what's going to happen to this stiff-necked, hard-headed people? Go ahead.
For the day shall come upon thee, that thine enemy shall cast a trench about thee, and compass thee round and keep thee in on every side.
So you're going to be besieged. Go ahead.
And shall lay thee even with the ground.
You're going to be raised, R-A-Z-E-D. Just like in the days of old. Go ahead.
And thy children within thee. They shall not leave in thee one stone upon another, because thou knewest not the time of thy visitation.
Because you didn't know who I was. You didn't know the time of our visitation. So here, the siege of Jerusalem. When did this take place? You see, he prophesies of it, but it happens approximately 40 years later. This is Jerusalem in Bible Times, page 149. Pat Lewis, or Louis Bell's paper. He says, it says in 66 AD, the war of rebellion against the Romans broke out, and in 70 AD, the siege of the city was begun by Titus. He was a Roman general. It says he would sit there by his father. It says, after a long, stubborn resistance, which necessitated that every wall and every court of the town should be conquered separately, the city at last fell in September 70 AD. The temple and other principal buildings were burned, and Titus gave orders that the city should be razed to the ground, except the wall enclosing Herod's palace that was left as a fortress for the Roman garrison. With this event, ancient Jerusalem came to an end. Up to this time, the life of the city had been uninterrupted in spite of all the disasters that had befallen. See, when we read about it, Leviticus 26, that's what's happening. But the Lord would allow Israel to come back and to get out of those situations when they were oppressed by other nations, but not after this. It says, in the thread of historical tradition in regard to localities had not been severed. But after this event, there was no longer any continuity with the past. That was the severing point, a cutting off point for us as a nation. That was it. So now you've been cut off from your land, and you've been separated from God. And where did Israel go? Where did they go? This is Africa's legacies of urbanization unfolding saga of a continent, page 65. It says, under the Ptolemies, and Cyrenaica of northern Libya had become the home of many Jews, and their numbers in this part of Africa were greatly increased by the Romans when Emperor Vespasian deported many others, increased after a rebellion against Roman rule in Palestine and the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70, we just read it. While some of them remain in coastal settlements. So, if you think about it, if powers from Europe have come against you and you're on the run, you're not running up into Europe. You're running into the interior of Africa. Because Israel ultimately is a part of Africa. The so-called Middle East is ultimately a part of Africa. All that's Africa. But it says, while some of them remain in coastal settlements, because the Israelites, they just made settlements throughout different parts of Africa. Others on the coast, others migrated deep into the Great Sahara, sometimes becoming nomads and at other times settling in towns and cities of the African interior. See, that's where we went. We went into the heart of Africa. We were always trying to run into the interior of Africa when things got rough. But let's go back to the scriptures, because he expounds on this final captivity. The Messiah does. This is Luke 21, chapter 20. Luke 21 and verse 20. We just went into the African interior. That's where we went. As strangers dwelling among the Hamitic or African nations. This is Luke 21 and verse 20. He foretells of the destruction of Jerusalem. Are you ready? Go ahead.
We shall see Jerusalem compassed with arms. Then know that the desolation thereof is not.
Know that tribulation and destruction is not. Let's skip down to verse 23. When you're ready, go ahead.
But woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days.
Go ahead.
For there shall be great distress in the land, and wrath upon this people. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations.
They'll be led what?
Captive into all nations.
They'll be led captive into all nations. Go ahead.
And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled.
So you go see that we read about that severing of time when it said the thread of historical tradition in regard to localities had not been severed prior to this, but after this point, after this event, there was no longer any continuity with the past. See, so it was a total separation from the past, and it's not like we're going to go back in. He said, you go be in captivity until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. And the times of the Gentiles has not been fulfilled yet. We're talking 2,000 years, and Israel is still in captivity. But one thing you see throughout Africa that many people don't talk about is you see what I refer to as the Hebrewisms of Africa. That's after a book, because when you look throughout Africa, what do you see? You see black people saying that they're Hebrews. That's what you see. You see the Limba tribe in South Africa who who they, according to their oral tradition, that they came from Israel. And they went through different parts. Mozambique, built Great Zimbabwe, and ultimately settled in South Africa. These are the Limba tribe. You have what they call Beta Israel, or erroneously called Philosophy, who are in Ethiopia, who people just stumbled upon. They say, yeah, we Jews. Great being, and they, many of them in Operation Moses and others, went into the land of Israel, came up under these false Jews' rule, and now they are being oppressed just like some Negroes in America. You have the Igbo Jews in Nigeria. When you look at where so-called African American came from, most of them can trace their lineage back to Nigeria and the Igbo. Igbo, many say, means Hebrew. So when you look at the Igbo, the Bantu, the Yoruba, the Fulani, Beta Israel, Limba, even the Ashanti. The Ashanti is a conglomerate of peoples. They say Ashanti means people of Ashan. They say many of their customs are Hebraic. But you have all these people claiming to be Israelites throughout Africa. And then what else you have? You have some Edomites trying to keep that quiet. So they'll come in and try to convert them into what they have, which is Judaism. And you cannot read about Judaism in this Bible. Many of them, truth be told, don't even follow the Bible, they follow the Talmud, which is a wicked book. This is a map of 1747. I don't know if you can see this here, but it says the Slave Coast, the Gold Coast. So that's just one someplace in Chicago. That's where they were getting black people from, this West Africa. And what was one of the names that they called that place? They called it Judah. That's what they called it. They called it Judah. That's where they're getting these Judeans from. You're settling all over West Africa, all over Africa. And as strangers amongst the people, more susceptible to being sold as slaves. You ever wonder why these Africans didn't come and get you? Because they know they are not you. That's why. We're still waiting on them to come get us. They're not coming. They're not coming. But then you have many of us who want to be Afrocentric. And I understand because we want to be something, right? We want to claim the whole continent of Africa, the most diverse continent on the planet, with over 50 countries. Negro, which country are you from? Are you Algerian? See, when somebody's a European, they say, hey, I'm Italian, I'm Irish, I'm Hungarian, I'm Russian. They don't say I'm European. That's a huge continent. Well, not huge. It's small, relatively speaking, with few resources. That's why they steal everything. But you can't. My point is that they narrow it down. You go to Africa, they will tell you, yeah, I'm from this country, this tribe, or this clan. They will tell you, they know all that. They can trace that. But ours, we've had a separation. When we separated from our God, we lost everything, even our identity, which we'll read about. But let's go to Deuteronomy 28, because how do you identify these people? Let's go to the book. Let's go to the book and read the curse. No need to read the blessings. Let's read the curses. These blessings were experienced but for a short time. It's Deuteronomy 28 and verse 15. Read it. It's like a mirror. When you're ready, go ahead.
But it should come to pass that thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command thee this day. And all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee.
And my father always says the ultimate premise of the Bible is telling you to be obedient. And that's what he was telling the people. Keep my commandments. They are good for you, but if you don't, you will be cursed. Verse 16.
Cursed shall thou be in the city. Cursed shall thou be in the field.
So wherever you go, cursed you're gonna be in the city. Cursed you're gonna be in the field. You in down south working, picking cotton, being oppressed, a nuanced form of slavery, a neo-slavery. You know, right after slavery, they had what was called convict leasing. So where if you weren't working on somebody's plantation, they would charge you with vagrancy, take you, put you in chains, and work you in conditions worse than slavery for years for not having a job on somebody's plantation. So whether many of us are here in Indiana and Chicago and places in Illinois, because our people came from Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, Tennessee, and where did we come to? Getting shot in the streets, public housing, violence, redlining. Go ahead.
Cursed shall be thy basket in thy store.
Economically, you're going to be cursed. We're going to look at some statistics, but go ahead.
Cursed shall be the fruit of thy body, the fruit of thy land, the increase of thy kind, and the flocks of thy sheep.
He said your children going to be cursed. The fruit of thy land and the increase of thy kind and the flocks of thy sheep. Everything you have is going to be cursed. It's like we walk around putting money in a pocket with a hole in it. You look at our children. They feel the juvenile detention centers. They are the ones graduating at 50%. They are the ones that have you locking your doors at night. Go ahead.
Cursed shall be thou when thou goest in, and cursed shall be thou when thou goest out.
Wherever you go, I'm going to bust you upside your head. Cursed shalt thou be when thou comest in, and cursed shalt thou be when thou goest out. I read this to somebody, they got mad, they got upset. You trying to say we cursed? And she going off, I said, yeah, and see, that's why. That attitude right there. But go ahead.
The Lord shall sit upon thee curse, vexation, and rebuke, and all that thou settest thine hand for to do, until thou be destroyed.
Nothing you do is going to benefit you. Nothing you're going to do is going to prosper as a people. When you can count on both hands the number of successful black people or our people in an area, that's not a lot. You shouldn't be able to count it. Go ahead.
And until thou perish quickly, because of the wickedness of thy doing, whereby thou hast forsaken.
Let's skip down to 25. You ready? Go ahead.
The Lord shall cause thee to be smitten for thine enemies. Thou shalt go out one way against them, and flee 7 ways before them, and shall be removed into all the kingdoms of the earth.
See, you're not going to migrate on some ship. No, rather, you're going to be removed. You're going to be kidnapped. You're going to be taken. It says, thou shalt go out one way against your enemy and flee 7 ways. Whereas before, you could drive away many. But no, they're going to drive you away. And you will be removed into all the kingdoms of the earth. That's why you can find us everywhere. Find us everywhere. There's people in India look just like us. Why y'all get hit? Slavery. People in Iraq, slavery. South America, slavery. The Caribbean. But go ahead.
And thy carcass shall be meat to all the fowls of the air, and to the beasts of the earth, and no man shall fray them away.
And these things again started prior to that final captivity. But go ahead.
The Lord will smite thee with the botch of Egypt, and with the emeralds, and with the scab, and with the itch, whereof thou canst not be healed.
Verse 28.
The Lord shall smite thee with madness and blindness and astonishment of heart.
You're gonna have post-traumatic. You're gonna be in such a condition, it's like you've been at war. Because ultimately what is it called? PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. That's what we have. We crazy as a people because we're in a condition that we see no way out of and can't figure things out. The Lord shall smite thee with madness and blindness and astonishment of heart, and thou shalt grope at noonday as the blind gropeth in darkness. So when you should have most light in the day, you're going to be just as a blind person, not knowing which way to go, backwards as a people. And thou shalt not prosper in thy ways, and thou shalt be only oppressed and spoiled evermore, and no man shall save thee. See, this is not talking about the so-called Jew today. He's prospering in everything. He's prospering economically. He runs the banks. He runs Hollywood. He lives amongst his enemies with power. Verse 30.
Thou shalt betroth the wife, and another man shall lie with her. Thou shalt build a house, and thou shalt not dwell therein. Thou shalt plant a vineyard, and shalt not gather the grapes thereof.
So you're going to take a wife, and another man is going to take her. Not saying she's sneaking around, but rather this interloper is going to come through the front door. It says, thou shalt build an house, and thou shalt not dwell therein. You're going to build a big house on the plantation. You're going to dwell in shacks. You're going to build a country and not benefit. That's what we did. I said that some white man said, you didn't do anything. You built cotton. I almost called him something. You know how you almost lose your religion? I almost called him something because we built this country. If you paid us reparations of what we owe, you'd have to give us the entire country. You can't pay us for what we've done. But it's sinking ship called America. Go ahead.
Verse 32. Thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and thine eyes should look and fail with longing for them all the day long. There should be no might in thine hand.
So they totally dehumanized us, raped us, caused us to work, sold our children. Verse 36.
The Lord will bring thee not king which thou shalt sit over thee, unto a nation which neither thou nor thy fathers have known.
Lineage of David running around here somewhere. Probably incarcerated. Go ahead.
And thou shalt serve other gods, wood and stone.
So he said, you know what? You want to serve these other gods? You're not going to do it in my land? You're going to go into these other nations and be oppressed, and you're going to serve these gods there. That's why when you go in our neighborhoods, you have these big edifices where we go in every Sunday, the raw day of the week. We pick them up, put them down, praise the Lord, and do nothing he says, and then you walk outside, and it's like it's a war zone. Go ahead.
And thou shalt become an astonishment, proverb and a byword among all nations where the Lord shall lead.
Everybody talk about us. People get off the boat and call us the N-word. You just got off the boat. You just crossed the border. N-word. That's how they think. Verse 38. Because they have a perception of us as well. Go ahead.
Thou shalt carry much seed out into the field, and shalt gather but little in, for the locust shall consume.
Skip down to verse 41.
Thou shalt beget sons and daughters, but shall not enjoy them, for they shall go into captivity.
The children are going into captivity. Verse 43.
The stranger that is within thee shall get above thee very high. Thou shalt come down very low. So
that happened then, and it even happens until this time. Somebody that dwells among you is going to come and be above you. Whereas how it was initially, if they dwell among you, more likely they would be serving you. Verse 44. What's the stranger going to do?
He shall lend to thee. Thou shalt not lend to him.
See, this is not talking about the so-called Jew today. He shall lend to thee. They are the ones doing the lending with fractional banking, lending out 9 to 10 times more than what they actually have. They are the ones that are printing paper and charging interest on paper. So it says, the stranger that is within thee shall get above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low. And that's what we are as a people, very low. He shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, and thou shalt be the tail. You hear our gospel songs now, so-called gospel songs. We blessed and highly favored. No, we not. We cursed and hated. Say, I'm gonna be the head and not the tail. We definitely the tail. If we are not the tail, I want to see the tail. If we the head, I'd hate to see the tail. Verse 45.
Moreover, all these curses shall come upon thee, and shall pursue thee and overtake thee, till thou be destroyed, because thou hearkenest not unto the voice of the Lord thy God.
All because we were stiff-necked, wouldn't listen. But these curses are something. Go ahead.
He said to keep his commandments and the statutes which he commanded thee.
And what are they? What are these curses? Go ahead.
And they should be upon thee for a sign and for a wonder, and upon thy seed forever.
So when you see the people who have suffered all of this, you know who Israel is. Let's skip down to 63. When you're ready, go ahead.
And it shall come to pass that the Lord rejoiced over you to do you good, to multiply. So the Lord will rejoice over you to destroy you and bring you to naught.
Turn your back on God and turn his back on you. This is worldwide dispersion. Verse 6, you finish that?
And ye shall be plucked from off the land whither thou goest to possess it. And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people, from one end of the earth even unto the other. And there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. That's
why we serving these false gods. You can find us in anything. You'll find us in other cultures' religions. You'll find us in Hinduism and you're not Chinese. You're not Asian. What are you doing? But you'll find us there. You'll find us in some of the most racist religion there is, Mormonism and Jehovah's Witnesses. You'll find us there. We do everything. false gods. Verse 65.
And among these nations shall thou find no ease. Neither shall the sole of thy foot have rest.
Go ahead.
But the Lord shall give thee there a trembling heart and failing of eyes and sorrow of mind.
Constant fear of the unknown. Looking at our situation, and we're in dire straits as a people. The masses are. Go ahead.
And thy life shall hang in doubt before thee. Thou shalt fear day and night, and shall have none assurance of thy life.
What will you say?
In the morning thou shalt say, with God will evening. And at evening thou wilt say, with God will morning. For the fear of thine heart wherewith thou shalt fear, for the sight of thine eyes which thou shalt see.
It's not going to matter what time of day it is. You're going to be cursed as a people. Verse 68.
And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships.
We read about Egypt. Egypt represents our first bondage. So Egypt was even called the house of bondage. So when it says, and the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, he said, I'm bringing you into bondage with or via slave ships. That's how you be carried into slavery. See, these curses are a sign. Go ahead.
By the way whereof I spake unto thee.
And what's going to happen?
Thou shalt see it no more again.
You won't see your land no more. Go ahead.
And then shall you be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen. And no man shall buy you.
Meaning no man, that means no man is going to redeem you. We've had brilliant men, sincere men. Marcus Garvey, W.B. Du Bois, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King. But they haven't redeemed us. We still in captivity. Why? Because they didn't understand that's not the solution. The solution is not integration. The solution is turning back to our God. But he said that you shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man is going to buy you or redeem you. We still in captivity. People say you're not a slave. Yeah, we might be driving cars. We get this so-called education, which is like today's brand. And we still in captivity. We never went home, have no concept of what freedom is. Still pledging allegiance to the flag. Like we lost our minds. So it said, cursed shall be thy basket and thy store. This is wealth gaps rise to record highs between whites, blacks, and Hispanics. The median wealth of white households is 20 times that of black households. So the average median net worth of households in 2009 for whites was $113,000, and for blacks it's $5,000. You say, well, look at Hispanics. This is only going to get higher. This is only going to get higher. It's higher than ours, and we built the country. See, before they were doing that agricultural work, we were doing that agricultural work. They use it as a stepping stone. I was talking to a Latino brother. I call him a brother humanity. He was hipping me to the game. He was like, yeah, I came over here, I worked. He was working 12, 14 hours a day, saving his money. He came from Mexico. Right now, what does he have? Several cars, several homes. It's building, in America, and it's building a house in Mexico. He told me, man, you should come to Mexico. I said, I can't come to Mexico. But he said, you should come to Mexico. He was in the UFC. I take my son to, he does boxing, and he was there talking to me. He said, yeah, I take my daughter here every day. If she's good, and she has a knack for this stuff, we'll start one of these in Mexico. If not, we'll open a store. Because he bought a building. But what did he come over here with? Nothing. So theirs is only going to rise. That sons and that daughters shall be given unto another people. This is from slavery and domestic slave trade in the United States. This is a slave trader being interviewed. It says, the interviewer says, do you buy the wife without the husband? The slave trader says, yes, very often and frequently too. They sell me the mother while they keep the children. I have often known them take away the infant from his mother's breast and keep it while they sold her. That shows you they don't see your humanity. To dehumanize you, to take the baby off of the mother's breast, that's savagery. Thou shalt betroth another wife. Thou shalt betroth a wife, and another man shall lie with her. This is from A People's History of Florida. This is Sam Everett. He recalled on this plantation were more than 100 slaves who were made indiscriminate. I'm going to skip down because it says he would force them to have children And then it said he used the same procedure if he thought a certain couple was not producing children fast enough. He would beat them ultimately. Then it says he enjoyed these orgies very much and often entertained his friends in this manner. Quite often he and his guests would engage in these debaucheries, choosing for themselves the prettiest of the young women. Sometimes they forced the unhappy husbands and lovers of their victims to look on. Thou shalt be taught to wife, and another man shall lie with her. That's what that's talking about. You see, he said he's going into slavery by way of slave ships. This is Brooks' slave ship, a diagram of it. These black things, that's us. Throwing people overboard, some people they drew jettison. Like I said, under the sea, what's that, a kingdom of bones? The Atlantic Sea is full of the carcasses of our people. Here's another one, because we talked about the curses. When you read Deuteronomy, what is it, the 21st chapter, it says, I'm just going to read it, talking about one that's hanged on a tree. His body shall not remain all night upon a tree, but thou shalt in any wise bury him that day, for he that is hanged is a curse of God. So the one that has the curse of God on him is hanged on trees. Who's been hanging on all these trees? Like strange fruit blowing in the southern breeze, but us. This is something from the lynching century. It goes from 1865 to 1965, more than 6,000 African Americans died in racial violence in the United States. This inventory includes the names of 2,400 of the African Americans who were lynched in the United States from 1865 to 1965. That was the Tuskegee Institute. I'm skipping down a little bit. The Tuskegee Institute lynching inventory began in 1882. Just before the great surge of lynchings that occurred around the turn of the century. See, so he was hanging on a tree. We were hanging on a tree. Just like when they besieged Jerusalem, the Romans did, what were they doing? They were crucifying people. That's just a lynching, being hanging on a tree. Jesus, the Messiah, took the curse that was on us upon himself and was what? Hanging on a tree. Here it says, Ida B. Wells said something. She said, the land of the free and the home of the brave, Americans have a long way to go to seek full realization of the promises of the Pledge of Allegiance. To see America as a land with liberty and justice for all instead of liberty and justice for the white Anglo-Saxon economic elite. That sister was strong. She was a journalist and would document all these lynchings and had her life threatened. She would carry a pistol. You want to find Israel? He said they are snared in homes and hid in prison houses. That's what Isaiah said. African American males are 6 times more likely to be incarcerated than white males. If current trends continue, 1 of every 3 black American males born today can expect to go to prison. That's from the Sentencing Project to the United Nations Human Rights Committee regarding racial disparities in the United States criminal justice system, August 2013. This is from Michelle Alexander's New Jim Crow. There are more African Americans under correctional control today in prison or in jail or on probation or parole than were enslaved in 1850. As of 2004, more African American men were disenfranchised due to felon disenfranchisement laws when you can't vote than in 1870. The year the 15th Amendment was ratified, prohibiting laws that explicitly deny the right to vote on the basis of race. And that's why people talk about the Constitution, but in the amendments in the 13th Amendment, they put in there, you can be enslaved if you commit a crime. And that's how they got us. When I talk about convict lacing, even until this day, it's still slavery in prison. If you take into account prisoners, a large majority of African American men in some urban areas like Chicago have been labeled felons for life. These men are part of a growing undercaste, not class, caste, a group of people who are permanently relegated by law to an inferior second-class status. They can be denied the right to vote, automatically excluded from juries, and legally discriminated against in employment, housing, access to education. You can't get money for school if you have a felony. You can't get public housing if you have a felony. It says, and public benefits, much as their grandparents and great-grandparents once were during the Jim Crow era. That's what it is. That's what it is. The next reference. I'm going to run out of time here. Because here we sit not knowing who we are, living the curses that Moses prophesied of every day, and then you have another people who claiming to be the Jew. How does that work? Well, they stole our identity. So this is from Encyclopedia Judaica. It says in the days of John the Baptist, it says at the end of the 2nd century BCE, the non-Israelite Edomites became a section of the Jewish people. Edom. They were converted. Okay? It says in the Jewish Encyclopedia, the non-Israelite Edomites were then incorporated with the Jewish nation. Okay, that's from Idumea, the Jewish Encyclopedia, published by Funky Wagners. Why am I saying Edom? Edom, because Edom, that's the one that's calling themselves a Jew today. Edom is not the white man. The New Standard Jewish Encyclopedia. From then on, the non-Israelite Edomites consisted of part of the Jewish people. Herod, king of Judea, which I mentioned earlier, began being one of their descendants. They, Edomites, were hereafter no other than Israelite Jews. That's from Josephus. Now something. This is from the Jewish Almanac that doesn't register the people. Why are you calling them a Jew if, when you read the scripture, all the tribes are supposed to come back? If they say they came back in 1948, it's a farce. They say something, you can find that through their own works. It says, strictly speaking, it is incorrect to call an ancient Israelite a Jew, or to call a contemporary Jew an Israelite or a Hebrew. Like people say Moses was a Jew. Moses was not a Jew. Moses was a Levite and an Israelite of the tribe of Levi. But it is wrong to call him a Jew. It is wrong to call him a Hebrew because by blood, by lineage, they are not. They are impostors. So that's our condition now. But let's go to Deuteronomy 4. So we retraced our steps and we see where we're at now. Now let's see where we're going. We've retraced our steps of history. Now we want to look to the future. This is Deuteronomy 4 and verse 26. What does Moses prophesy before Israel even goes into the land? When you're ready, go ahead.
I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day. And ye shall soon utterly perish from off the land, whether until ye go over Jordan to possess it. Ye shall not prolong your days upon it, but shall utterly be destroyed.
So you're going to cross over Jordan, I'm telling you, you're going to make a mess. You're going into captivity. But go ahead.
And the Lord shall scatter you among the nations. Ye shall be left few in numbers among the heathen, whether the Lord shall lead.
Go ahead.
And there ye shall serve gods, the work of men's hands, wood and stone, which neither see nor hear, nor eat nor smell.
Can you imagine them listening to this? They just been delivered, and then he's telling them this before they even go into the land? They're still in the wilderness. But go ahead.
But if from thence thou shalt seek the Lord thy God, thou shalt find.
He says you're going to be cast into slavery, but if from in those enslaved places that you are enslaved in, if you would seek the Lord, not integration, but seek the Lord thy God, thou shalt what?
Find.
Thou shalt find him, and thou seek him with all thy heart and with all thy soul, and be ready to worship him and serve him, even when?
When thou art in tribulation, and all these things are come upon you. Even in the latter days.
Even in the latter days. Even right now. Go ahead.
If thou turn to the Lord thy God, shall be obedient unto his voice.
Go ahead.
For the Lord thy God is merciful, God. He will not forsake thee, he will destroy thee, nor forget the covenant of thy fathers which he has swear unto them. You
hear Negroes all the time say, what are we to do? We need education. We need economic power. We need military power. What you need to do is turn to the true power source, who is God. This is the last place, Ezekiel. But that our destiny is already written as a people. This is Ezekiel 20. Because we've suffered so much, rightfully so. The Lord has not forgotten us. This is Ezekiel 20 and verse 33. When you're ready, go ahead.
As I live, said the Lord God, surely with a mighty hand, with a stretched out arm, and with fury poured out, will I rule over you.
He said, listen, you a trip. Stiff-necked, hard-headed, trifling. Can't put it any other way. But it says, I am going to rule over you. Go ahead.
And I will bring you out from the people.
And I will bring you from those places where you've been scattered. We read in Matthew 24, he talks about how he's going to gather his very elect from the four winds, from one end of the heaven to the other. Go ahead.
And will gather you out of the country wherein you were scattered with a mighty hand,
go ahead,
with a stretched out arm, with fury poured out.
But he says, even in another place, I'm going to fight for you. You read in Joel. But go ahead.
And I will bring you into the wilderness of the people. There will I plead with you face to face.
We're going to try this one more time. We tried it before in the days of Moses and Aaron. We're going to try this one more time. It's not going to take 40 years either. Go ahead.
Because I pleaded with your fathers in the wilderness of the land of Egypt. So will I plead with you, said the Lord God. And I will cause you to pass under the rod, and I will bring you into the bond of the covenant.
I will bring you into the bond of the covenant. And what's he going to do for those who just don't want to listen? Go ahead.
And I will purge out from among you the rebels, and them that transgress against you.
Go ahead.
I will bring them forth out of the country where they sojourn. And they shall not enter into the land of Israel.
And what will they know?
And ye shall know that I am the Lord.
You shall know that I am the Lord. So that's our history, retracing it through the Bible, history, archaeology. We see our present condition, and we even see our future. So with that, I want to thank you for your time. It's always my prayer that you would edify. And with that, close out. Close out.
Our Father which art in heaven,
our Father which art in heaven,
hallowed be thy name.
Hallowed be thy name.
Thy kingdom come.
Thy kingdom come.
Thy will be done.
Thy will be done.
On earth,
as
it is in heaven.
As it is in heaven.
Give us this day our daily bread.
Give us this day our daily bread.
Give us our debt.
And forgive us our debts.
We forgive our debtors.
As we forgive our debtors.
And lead us not into temptation.
And lead us not into temptation.
But deliver us from evil.
But deliver us from evil.
Thine is the kingdom.
Thine is the kingdom.
Power.
Power.
Glory.
Glory.
Forever. Praise the Lord.
Praise the Lord.
He is good.
He is good.
His mercy endures forever.
And his mercy endures forever.
Praise the Lord God of Israel.
Praise the Lord God of Israel.
He is good.
He is good.
His mercy endures forever.
And his mercy endures forever.
These things we pray in Jesus' name.
These things we pray in Jesus' name.
Holy One of Israel.
Holy One of Israel.
The mighty one of Jacob.
Mighty one of Jacob.
The Lord of Lords.
Lord of Lords.
King of Kings.
King of Kings.
Amen.
Amen.